Welcome back. Well, today I am joined by Dr. Lucio Losa, who is here on behalf of Kaiser Permanente, Orange County. Well, Dr. Losa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, one of your specialties is regarding colorectal cancer. And of course, this is a very important subject. And many times it goes without notice, primarily because many people avoid going to the doctor and they don't get checked for it. So before we get into the screening and how important it is to get checked, tell me what it is.
So let's start off with what is cancer, right? That's something that we're all afraid of. Basically what it is, we have cells dividing in our body, and every day these cells are dividing, and all it takes is one change, one mutated cell to continue dividing unchecked, and that essentially leads to cancer. And our body does things to correct for these mutations, but all it needs is one to just go. So as you can imagine, these mutations are taking place at a microscopic level, so it could take years for these tumors to finally evolve and show up and actually sometimes cause symptoms, which is why it's so important to screen for things that we have capability to screen for, whether it be breast cancer, cervical cancer, and what we're talking about today, colorectal cancer screening.
So, that's really kind of a frightening statistic if you think about it, that it only takes one change and you can have, is that any type of cancer?
And that could be, yeah, for any type of cancer. And certainly there's genetic predisposition, but there's also environmental as well. So things that we know that we need to be careful with that put you at an increased risk for any type of cancer, and certainly for colorectal cancers, is smoking, for example, excessive alcohol use, excessive consumption of red meat. Now that's one, in 2018, that's when it came out the news that red meat probably has carcinogens rather, which could induce cancer. And if you think about it, if you're eating more than 50 grams of red meat a day, that increases your risk of colorectal cancer by about 18%. Now, what's 50 grams? We're not all measuring how much we eat, right? So 50 grams, to just kind of give you an idea, is like 4 strips of bacon or one hot dog. Yeah. So
oh my gosh.
It's not much if you think about it. And we love our steaks, and we love our hot dogs, and we love our barbecues. Just with everything, look, too much of a good thing isn't always good for you, including that. So everything in moderation. So these are some of the things that we can do to kind of help control and prevent cancers.
Okay, that's sad, because I love bacon.
I love steak, but it's just not every day.
No, you're right. Not every day. What if we cut it way back to maybe 3 times a week? Is that still too much?
Yeah, it might still be a little bit too much. Again, moderation is key here. And if you can limit it to like once a week would probably be your best bet. Just, again, I always go with the too much of a good thing isn't always good for you. And it's better also, and we all need to improve on this, increasing on our fiber intake. Increasing on our green leafy vegetables. You go to the produce section in the store, fruits and vegetables that are colored, right? Greens. Those are all good because they have antioxidants. Antioxidants help with our immune system, okay? And they also help to fight cancer. Because when I talk about these mutations, these cells, they mutate, they cause these free radicals. Antioxidants actually help to fight against that. So that's why it's key to have a balanced diet, less of the red processed meat and more of the high fiber whole grains, fruits and vegetables.
But we could also substitute other meats, right? Like we could substitute chicken and fish.
Oh, absolutely. You could do poultry, you could do fish. And if you had to choose between one of those 3, meat, poultry, and fish is probably going to be your best bet in terms of health factor, pound for pound. So, but you could certainly do that as well to make sure you're getting your balance of protein throughout the day as well.
Okay, excellent. Because, many people seem to be moving towards these protein-based diets, and, they eat a lot of meat and they eat a lot of chicken and maybe not so much fish, but it seems like a lot of people are moving towards those. So how dangerous is that for people to do?
Well, you do have to be careful with that, and then it has to be tailored specifically to the individual, because some people may have other comorbidity like kidney problems or liver problems. So you really need to consult your doctor when you're considering these types of diets, number one. it's better to have a balanced diet, to have your fiber, your whole grains, your fruits and vegetables, to have your carbohydrates, to have your proteins. Again, too much of it is not going to be healthy for you. And the reality is a lot of people do it for what? For weight loss, right? There is no one solid diet that's better than any others. There are a few diets where it's suggested that may be a little bit better in terms of weight loss, but more for balance. It's all about the balance. If you change your diet and number one, you restrict your caloric intake and increase your energy expenditure, you're going to lose weight.
Right.
Sustainability is the key though. And if
Yeah.
you're just loading up on a pound of bacon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's not the best way to go. Because again, not only cancer, but then you're talking about cardiovascular risk. The
Right.
number one cause of mortality is still cardiovascular disease. So, you got to really take everything with a grain of salt, do your research, consult with your physician if you're going to be entertaining any of these diets.
Well, thank you. I know that's a little bit off the subject matter, but I just happen to have to ask that because I just feel like more and more people are going that way. Let's go back to colon cancer. How common is it?
So, great question. If you think about it, if you go to the American Cancer Society homepage, they estimate that in 2021, about 1.9 million people will be diagnosed with some sort of cancer, right? That's a lot. And of those 1.9 million diagnosed, they estimate that more than 600,000 will die from a cancer. Putting
Wow.
that into perspective, we're in the pandemic, right? And in the United States, we're over 560 deaths. I believe it was 568,000 as of yesterday. And that's just a massive number.
Mhm.
Well, but putting things into perspective, you're still having a lot of people die from cancer, period. Now, colorectal cancer, where does that fall? It is the third leading cause of cancer, and it's the second leading cause of death related to cancer. So it's very important that we do focus on that, and look at the screening modalities that we have to be able to catch and detect it early, because it really does make a difference. At the end of the day, this is about saving lives, period. And if we could do that, we can increase survival. Why not do it?
So I'm sure that you're going to say that our screenings are going to start when you're 50 years old and we're going to need to have a colonoscopy. And I'm imagining, if they're like me, sometimes I'm, I really don't think I need a colonoscopy. And so tell me, what are some of the treatments and the screenings for that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So first, let's kind of talk about the age and what are the guidelines and recommendations there. So the American College of Gastroenterology, the United States Preventative Services Task Force, they both recommend average risk screening at age 50, okay? And it's gonna go 50 to age 75. Those are the recommendations. There are special populations, for example, if you have a family history, first degree relative, you're going to go ahead and screen either at age 40 or 10 years earlier than when that family member was diagnosed, whichever comes earlier. So for example, if my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer at age 50, then I would start screening at age 40. And any intervals of continuing to screen, typically about 5 years, but it depends on the findings when they actually do the screening processes, namely the colonoscopy, which is our gold standard. And then you have other special populations as well. Obviously, if somebody's having any symptoms, all right, if they're having weight loss, fatigue, anemia, they have abdominal pain, bloating, sudden change in their bowel habits where they were always very regular, now they're constipated, they have diarrhea. What's going on there? We need to investigate that. And in those individuals, especially blood, any kind of bleeding, please, I would implore everybody, don't ever ignore any of these things. Get
Mhm.
checked out. And that's more important now more than ever because, in looking at surveys, about 78% of Americans delayed some sort of medical care in the last year because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate, but, to your viewers, your members, our members, we're open. We want to see you. Come reach out to us. So those are kind of the screening modalities. And then there's another special population that we need to pay closer attention to. Over the last few years, thankfully, incidence and mortality rates have actually gone down a little bit for the 50 and older population. That's still the highest risk, though. The older you get, the higher your risk. but we're seeing an increased number of incidents and mortality in those that are under the age of 50. Most likely multifactorial, diet, behavioral, smoking, alcohol, sedentary, if you're not getting enough physical activity. We talked about antioxidants earlier. Physical activity can increase your antioxidants in your body as well. So that's something that we need to pay closer attention to. And that's why in 2018, the American Cancer Society actually recommends starting screening at age 45. Again, there's all these different stakeholders in the game. And currently, American College of Gastroenterology, the United States Preventative Services Task Force, they're recommending age 50 and older for average risk. But that may change in the future. And then there's the Black community. We're seeing higher incidence and higher mortality rates for colorectal cancer in the Black community. So that's another community that screening is actually recommended at age 45. So those are a few things in regards to screening. Now, I mentioned earlier screening, so 50 to 75. Well, what if you're older than 75? What do we do? Okay, then it's time to have a conversation with your physician. The guidelines are if the life expectancy is 10 years or more in someone that's 75 years of age, you can go ahead and do it. Or if you have somebody that's 75 and they've never had any kind of screening, which happens as well. So at the end of the day, having that conversation with your physician in regards to screening is crucial. Now, what do we do about screening? You mentioned it earlier. Colonoscopy, oh my gosh, do I really need that? You joke about it, you get to the age and then nobody wants to do it. So there are a few ways to go ahead and screen for colorectal cancer. There is a stool-based method, which is recommended by the American College of Gastroenterology and the United States Preventative Services Task Force, and that's called the FIT kit. So it's called the Fecal Immunochemistry test. That one, it's very easy, it's cost-effective, it's not invasive, and it's pretty good at detecting cancers. What it does, it detects for blood in your stool that may not be visible to the eye, right? So once it's positive, then the downside of that, it's going to trigger a colonoscopy, which may be a good thing, right? Because we need to make sure you're okay. And also, it needs to be done annually. This is a test that needs to be done on an annual basis. But again, very easy to do. You could do it at home. It's not messy at all. It shouldn't be. And because that could be a sensitive topic for some individuals when you're talking about colonoscopies and screening for colorectal cancer screening. But at the end of the day, like we talked about earlier, this is about saving your life, potentially. So that's one. The gold standard, like we talked about earlier, is still the colonoscopy. There's nothing like going inside your colon, visualizing it, and make sure that there's nothing going on there. The colonoscopy can serve not only for diagnosis, in terms of identifying some of these polyps, which are what we see. And the polyps, there's three main types. There's hyperplastic, inflammatory, and adenomatous. The adenomatous ones are usually the ones that convert or can convert to cancer, even though it's not often. But the nice thing about the colonoscopy, you identify it, you remove it. So it can actually be therapeutic. And if you remove it on time, okay, then your survival rate could be greater than 90%.
That's great.
So it makes a huge difference. The downside of the colonoscopy, it does take time. The day before, you have to prep. So you have to drink this 4-liter solution of something called Golightly to clean out your gut. The last thing you want to do is go to get your colonoscopy and you still have stool on the walls of the intestine where the gastroenterologist can't visualize everything. So you got to make sure you prep adequately. And then the following day of the day of the colonoscopy, you need a ride. So you need somebody to take you. You will be getting sedation to make you comfortable. And so we'll need a ride. Now, the good thing is, if it's normal, no polyps, nothing else going on, you're good for 10 years. You don't have to check it again for 10 years. So isn't that a relief, right?
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Well, thank you so much for all of this great information. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And again, to everybody, we're open, we're waiting for you, and we want to make sure that we're meeting your healthcare needs. Thanks so much for having us.
All right, thank you. And we'll be right back after this.